You've all seen the colorful bubbles popping up in different TED Talks and in different scenarios. So we will now have the pleasure of having Gapminder here with us and sharing their knowledge about what's happening in the world, and also a bit of knowledge how you have responded to different issues. So please welcome Mr. Olof Gränström from Mikael, and Mikael, I'm coming to that, Mikael Arevius from Gapminder. Welcome, the scene is yours.
Thank you. Your Highnesses, Your Excellences, founders and friends, thanks for being here and thanks for having us here. So we're from Gapminder and we're an independent Swedish foundation, and Gapminder fights devastating misconceptions about global facts. The most famous Gapminder was Professor Hans Rosling. Our work is to continue the mission of telling the global facts that are missing in public knowledge. So Hans traveled the world and he taught us about the global development, and he asked questions for over a decade. And these questions we still answer wrong. So Olof Gränström, he will give you a crash course on the global facts, and then I will tell you why it is so difficult to know the global facts.
So we usually start with doing a little test to test your knowledge, and most of you have one of these. And we are going to ask 3 questions that we constructed together with the Baltic Nest Institute just for this event. So they're a little bit different from ordinary Gapminder questions. The first one is, how have nutrient loads to the Baltic changed in the past 20 years? A, they haven't changed. B, they have increased by 25%. And C, they have decreased by 25%. So if everybody votes, and I think we can take the next question now. And the second question, how has phosphorus input from Russia to the Baltic changed in the past decade? No change, it has almost doubled, or it has decreased by half. And the last question. How, and this is not about the Baltic region, how many people in the world today have access to improved water? Is it 50% of the people of the world? Is it 70% of the people of the world? Or is it 90% of the people of the world? And now I hope we're going to see the right answers. This is always very tricky to get them up. So here, actually, 53% of you know that the nutrient loads have decreased the last 20 years. Which is kind of fun that only 50% know it, because in the movie that started this conference, they said they have decreased. You got the answers. You got the right answer an hour ago, and only 50% get the question right. Something is wrong here. And the next question. How has the phosphorus input from Russia to the Baltic changed in the past decade? It has also decreased. So there are good things happening in the Baltic. And here 47% got it right. And the last question. And now we hope we're gonna get, and here most of you got it wrong. Over 90% of the world population have access to improved water today. If we have asked this question to a chimpanzee, 33% would have gotten it right. It's a 3-answer question. So most of you didn't know that most people have access to improved water today. And some of you did a pre-test before this conference where we asked 12 questions, the questions that Hans have spoken about for 10 years, over 10 years. 12 questions about basic global facts that most people should know. Most people don't know. This was how many people that got it right. One person in here got it right. No, it was a professor from Stockholm University that got it right. Most people got between 2 and 5 questions right. These are basic, simple questions. So how come that so many people get these questions wrong? And we have missed something. We have missed global development the last 200 years, the last 20 years. This graph shows on the horizontal, it shows our health in the form of life expectancy. And on the vertical, it shows our wealth in the form of GDP per capita. The size of the bubbles is the population of a country. And the color shows in which region of the world it is. It is red for Asia, it's yellow for Europe, and it's blue for Africa. And what we have missed is, and it should have been a movie there, and it's not a movie. What we have missed is that in all the countries of the world, there has been a development. We live healthier lives and financially richer lives than we did 200 years before. So the world has changed in this for the good. It's not only that we miss facts about the world, it's feelings. We have huge misconceptions, feelings about the world that is not right. One feeling that we have found on Gapminder when we ask these ignorance questions and analyze the answers is that the world is just getting worse. This is an easy feeling to have. And it's not entirely right. A lot of things are improving. We're not saying that the world is perfect. It's far from perfect. But there are a lot of things improving. For example, today most boys and girls get to go to primary school. This wasn't the case 20 years ago. And the difference between girls and boys attending primary school is lessening. Today, over 90% of boys and girls get to attend primary school. And here we actually almost reached one of the Millennium Goals. There's been a lot of talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. The world got together 17 years ago and put up the Millennium Goals. And here we were close to reaching them. When it comes to improved water, today, as you didn't know, most people have access to improved water. And here we reached the Millennium Goals. So when we come together, we can actually reach the goals we set. And the child mortality, it has dropped dramatically. And it's continuing to drop. Today, it's on an all-time low. And here we almost reached the Millennium Goals. So things are improving. It's not perfect, but a lot of things are improving. Another misconception we have about the world is that the world is divided in two. The world is divided in rich and poor people, rich and poor countries. And this is not entirely true. I hope this visualization works. This is the world in the year 1800. The vertical axis is the income per day. And the size of the mountain is the population. And the little dotted line is the extreme poverty line. And in the beginning of the 19th century, most people lived in extreme poverty. And then something started to happen. We got a lot more people, the population grew, and as you see, most people are moving out of poverty. And here in the 60s and 70s, we have a divided world where we had rich and poor people. But today, most people are out of poverty. Today, most people live in the middle. They don't live in high-income countries. They don't live like we do. But they are not in extreme poverty anymore. They have moved out of poverty. And it's not really about 2 groups anymore. It's more about 4 groups. Low income, lower middle, upper middle, and high income. So you shouldn't think of the world in 2 income groups. It's more 4 income groups. And the last mega misconception we have seen in Gapminder is that the population just keeps growing. And that is a very easy misconception to have when you see a graph like this. It shows a dramatic population increase for the last 200 years. And today we are over 7 billion people in the world. We are 7.4 billion people in the world. But something has changed. I've spoken about that child mortality has gone down. We spoke about life expectancy going up. But at the same time, the number of children per woman has gone down. And today, it's down to 2.5 children per woman. And we predict, the UN population experts predict it will go down even further to about 2 children per woman. But still, population is predicted to grow. Population is predicted to grow to about 11 billion people. And how is that if there are not that many children born anymore? This is one of the trickiest things to understand. So I'm going to let an expert explain it. And I hope the movie works.
The world population is growing fast. The experts say it will continue to grow fast for another 50 years, but then the fast growth will end. How can they know? The clue is the age structure. These are the 7 billion people in the world today. This shows how old they are. Each level is a 15-year age group. Below age 15, there are 2 billion children. 15 to 30, 2 billion, rounded numbers. 30 to 45, 1 billion. 45 to 61 billion. And this is my age group, 60 years and older, 1 billion. Let's assume 2 things about the future. Life expectancy will not increase, and the number of children will not increase. And remember, these are the children of today. So what will happen next? The old will sadly die. The rest will grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. Then again, the old will die. The rest will grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. And the old will die. The rest will grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. And look, 3 billion people will be added to the world population by this big inevitable fill-up of adults, just because of the age structure of the population today. After the fill-up, look what happens. The old die, the rest grow older and have 2 billion children. That's how the fast growth ends, by the time the children of today have reached my age group. So, population will continue to grow for another 50 years, even without a growing number of children, and even without lives getting longer. And in fact, the number of children is not expected to increase. But life expectancy is estimated to get longer. And that will indeed add 1 billion people. So around 11 billion by the year 2100.
So that was the crash course on basic fact that most people have missed. We have put together a basic global facts test. It's 12 questions, and all of us could be Gapminders just by knowing these 12 facts and spreading the test and making people know the global facts that Hans has put so much dedication in teaching us. So now we need to know why people get the facts wrong. Because you can see the facts here, but some way these facts gets lost. So we need to understand how we as humans view the world. So let's start with what we see. We see the catastrophes in the media and find it harder to see that we also build modern buildings that protect us from natural disasters. We see conflicts, but we find it harder to see developments in society, like improved access to education, for example. We see diseases and find it difficult to see improvements in access to vaccines and basic health care. If we can afford, we travel the world and visit tourist destinations designed as paradise. We see cultures, often the most exotic part of it, minorities, events, and holiday celebrations. And we see the wildlife in documentaries. So all these images becomes a dramatic worldview. And now, perhaps some of you feel like blaming the media for not giving us a representative and fact-based worldview. But let's do some slow thinking instead, and let me tell you something about how we think. Your brain is actually adapted to the life on the savannah for 10,000 years ago. So your brain is wired for surviving the nature by finding the threats and threats in the world you're living. So we at Gapminder say that your brain has cravings for sugar, fat, and drama. So today we have all kinds of information about the world, everything from the latest UN statistics to the most spectacular news. So our brain is looking out for us, or your brain is looking out for you, filtering out the most urgent stuff, like the threats, choosing the dramatic images of violence, terror, and catastrophes. And if you don't mind your thinking, that will become your skewed worldview. Factfulness is about making the effort of understanding the world based on facts. We can learn to recognize feelings and thought patterns that lead us to these misconceptions. There are hundreds of dramatic instincts or cognitive traps that we can fall into. We have picked out 10 that we think it's important to teach in school and to think about for everyone. And let me quickly tell you about 3 of them. Fear, one of the most basic feelings that we have. And if you're unaware of your fear, you will react to all kinds of scary images. So learn to recognize and control your fears. Overconfidence. We like the feeling of being on top of things. So we often make conclusions based on the information we have in front of us that we see, which is often too limited information. For example, if you see stories about girls being kept out of school, what conclusion can you make about the global access for girls in school? Not much. In order to make a conclusion, you have to have statistics. You have to view the long-term statistical trends. And gaps. When you see differences in extremes, the positive, the negative, those who care about the Baltic Sea and those who don't care about the Baltic Sea, remember that most are in the middle. There has never been more information and facts than today. Only tomorrow beats today. So we need guidelines, tools, and framework to make sense of the information, to structure the information. And this 12 basic global fact test is one way of focusing on central and basic global facts.
because it's very easy to get the facts wrong, even when you work with very serious matters like the SDGs. For example, Hans wrote an article about maternal health in Lancet. He wrote that he had found that a number of 60% of maternal health happens in humanitarian settings like refugee camps, conflict areas, or natural disaster areas. And he said, this can't be true. And he looked at the fact and checked the fact, and of course it wasn't true. But this fact has existed in Swedish policy material. It has sneaked its way into UN policy material. And of course, it's a good thing that people focus on maternal health. It's a good thing that people focus on conflict areas, refugee camps. But if you have the facts wrong, it can hide where the real problem is. And the real problem here is areas of extreme poverty. So you should always check the facts. So you should always be humble about your facts. We often think that we know the facts, but we don't, as our test showed today.
And if you take the first development goal, no poverty, you might think that the UN has gone mad if you don't know that the poverty rate has been reduced by half the last 20 or 30 years. So that's one thing that Hans told us. And another thing that he asked us to do was to be able to keep two thoughts in our heads at the same time. There are improvements. We should recognize them. And we should also be able to think that there are problems. We should be able to have two thoughts in our heads at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you.